Hey, what's up guys? It's BareTrap with AZ Fly Shop. Today we're going to be tying a damsel fly nymph. This pattern is it's one of my favorite stillwater patterns. I fish it in every single one of our lakes here in Arizona. We have, if you've ever seen those blue dragonflies that fly around all the lakes up in the White Mountains and up on the rim, those are adult damsel flies. And what we're tying today is the free swimming nymph version of that. Trout eat them, bass eat them, everything eats them. You can tie them in a bunch of different sizes and even some different colors. I personally like variations of olive. The important thing is to tie them in a bunch of different weights. And you can do that by changing the eyes on them, and I'll show you guys a couple different options that you might have. And let's get to tying. All right, for this one, we're gonna start out with a FireHole 718 in size 16. We've already got one in the vise, and for thread on this fly, I like using the Uni 6/0, just olive, matches the body of the fly, and 6/0 is a pretty strong thread, so I can kind of wrench on it a little bit. So I'm gonna give myself a nice thread base to start out. Cut that tag end, and then we're gonna tie in our eyes. And for eyes on this fly that I'm tying today, I'm gonna be using a set of small bead chain eyes. You can tie it with a bunch of different kinds of eyes to add or reduce weight. Sometimes I'll tie them with some extra small brass eyes. Sometimes I'll tie them with some tungsten eyes. Sometimes I'll tie them with these mono nymph eyes, these plastic eyes, and just depending on what kind of weight I want on the fly. But today we're gonna go with some bead chain eyes, some small bead chain eyes in gold. Sometimes I'll tie them with black. I don't think it matters too much what color the eyes are. So I'm going to put a couple X wraps over top of these eyes just to get them seated. And then I like to build up a bunch of thread underneath of them, kind of creating a donut and just a mass of thread underneath of them, and that helps the eyes not spin. And kind of give myself a nice little body there, give them a nice little adjustment, and then we're going to tie in our tail. And for the tail on this fly, I'm using a couple different colors of this Hareline Extra Select marabou. This is absolutely my favorite marabou. It's long, it's got a bunch of really nice usable feathers in it, and a lot of these feathers you can use multiple times and get multiple flies out of them. So you take one of your feathers, and as you can see, I've cut pieces off of it. I've tied a couple flies with it, this one feather already. So you're gonna just take a little bit, about half an inch worth of feathers there, just about like that, and cut it off of the main stem. And I like to measure my tail on these flies. Sometimes I'll tie them a little bit longer, sometimes I'll tie them a little bit shorter, but I like to tie them about the same length as the shank. And I'll pre-trim them just to make it easier. And I'll start them tying in right behind those eyes that I tied in, and tie it all the way back to the shank, to the bend of the shank. Then all the way back up behind the eyes and leave my thread there. Now, for the second color of marabou on the tail, I used just a little bit of chartreuse. Where you used about maybe a quarter or half an inch in the olive, you are going to use about 3 sprigs of chartreuse, 3 or 4 sprigs, just enough to add just a little bit of an accent color. I think it gives the fly a little bit more dimension. It's more for me than the fish. I say that a lot, but I like my flies to look cool too. And I will, again, start tying that in right behind the eyes and tie it all the way back to the bend of the hook and make it exactly as long as the olive part of the tail. Now, next, we're gonna tie in our ribbing material. And for ribbing material on this fly, I'm using the Uni soft wire in red. I also will rib this fly with chartreuse vinyl ribbing sometimes, but more often than not, I'm using a wire. I think it's just really easy to work with, and it shows segmentation very well. I personally like the red. I've also tied it in with a black rib, and it works just as well. So you tie that in, stop right at the base of the tail, and then you're gonna make your body. And for the body on this fly, I like using this Hareline super fly dry fly dubbing, or super fine dry fly dubbing. The reason I like using dry fly dubbing is because you can get a really thin dubbing noodle on your thread. Just take out just a little bit, just the smallest amount, just enough to cover that thread when you're making your dubbing noodle. And the thing with dubbing, it's way easier to add more than to take it away. So always start with less, and then you can add more if you need it. And I do need it. So we're gonna dub up this body. I'll have Chris speed this part up for you guys so it doesn't take as long. Maybe if he's nice, he'll try to add the Benny Hill theme while this is going on.
You could do karaoke trap while it's going on.
Karaoke and tying. That's different.
That would be different, yeah.
So now, to create the rib on this, you're just gonna, I like wrapping it counterclockwise. Nice loose wraps just to show some segmentation in the body of this fly. I'll do 3 or 4 wraps depending on what size hook. This is on a 16, so I'm just gonna do 3, and then capture that wire right behind the eyes, and then I like to do the helicopter spin and break it off. Just like that. Now, it is a wing case on this fly, and it kind of goes right up over top of the eyes, and for that, I like to use just any pheasant tail. I use the Hareline pheasant tail personally, but any pheasant tail will work. And you're gonna take about 5 or 6 little strands of pheasant tail here, and cut them off of your main stem, and then tie those in right behind those eyes. There you go. Now, so these damsel nymphs, when they're swimming around in the water, they have little wing buds starting to form. They're, making their way into adults, and they're actually starting to grow their wings and things like that. So to represent those wing buds, I like to use a Hungarian partridge feather. I've used other things before. Mourning dove works really well. Gambler quail works really well too. But I really like Hungarian partridge. It's fairly easy to find. We have it down here in the shop, and we'll also put a link to all these materials in the description, so you guys can look it up super easy. And you're gonna take this feather and brush the barbs back on it until you get just to the tip. So you want just that little bit of tip there, and go ahead and cut that right off. That way, when you brush these feathers back forward, it leaves this gap in them. And what I like to do is I'll pick off some of these extra ones down here that I'm not gonna need. Maybe a little bit wasteful, but it makes tying it in easier for me. and you will take this feather with that gap right in the middle and put that gap, put your pheasant tail that you tied in right in that gap, right between those two feathers that are sticking out. And I like to grab it from the top and hold it straight down and then capture it all right behind those eyes. And move it around so you get to, it's where you want it. And trim off your excess feather. And then take your peacock or your pheasant tail that you left hanging out here and stretch it over top of your eyes. Hold it down with your finger, just like that, and trap it right behind the hook eye and snip off the excess. And then whip finish. And there it is. You have yourself a damsel nymph. So there's our damselfly nymph. Like I was saying earlier, this thing works absolutely amazing on all of our lakes in the White Mountains and up on the rim. All of those lakes have damselflies, so they're all going to have the damselfly nymphs, and the fish just love them. They work really well on the Salt River, and you can fish them in a bunch of different ways. You can fish them under an indicator, you can fish them on an intermediate sink line or a full sink line. You can dead drift them, you can slow strip them, you can do a whole bunch of different things, and they just catch fish. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to shoot us a comment, but feel free to stop in the shop as well. We have all the materials down here, and we can get you what you need to tie up a whole bunch for yourself and start catching fish on them. Definitely like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.